Hello, I'm Dr. Julie Beischel, Director of Research at the Windbridge Research Center, where we study dying, death, and what comes next. The majority of our research is with mediums, individuals who experience communication from the deceased regularly, reliably, and on demand. And they share messages with the living, who we refer to as sitters, during a process called a reading. So today I'm joined by Windbridge Certified Research Mediums Daria Justyn, Laura Lynne Jackson, and Traci Bray, who, like all Windbridge Certified Research Mediums, were screened, tested, and trained over several months using an intensive 8-step peer-reviewed certification procedure. These mediums volunteer their time to participate in research as well as public outreach events like this one. We are not certifying new mediums at this time. At the center, we talk about a mediumship reading as a triad because 3 people are involved: the medium, the sitter, and the deceased communicator. And for the reading to be successful, all 3 people have to do their job well. So today, Daria, Laura, and Traci will be sharing information that may help sitters make the most of their mediumship reading and specific things they might want to keep in mind before, during, and after the reading. So we'll start with Daria Justyn, who joins us from New Jersey and has been a practicing medium for 19 years. She is the author of Angels Whisper to Us, Decoding the Messages in Daydreams. So Daria, what kinds of things can sitters do to optimize their readings before they even start?
Hi, thank you for having me, Julie. Yeah, I always begin by telling sitters, I call them sitters, right, that our energy is not passive. We are energetic beings, and their energy will contribute to the reading. So I also like to point out that expectations are very different from intentions. An intention to be open, relaxed, receptive, it creates an engagement with the discarnate that allows the energy to flow, the information to flow. Whereas an rigid expectation that sets up a block, it constricts the energy, it constricts the flow of energy. And then they're so focused on what they want to hear that what they need to hear just can pass them right by. Many sitters are nervous to begin with, so I tell them messages from discarnates are usually filled with humor, love, understanding, and knowing that can assist them in relaxing, letting go of fear. I also ask them to ask the discarnates to show up for them. I just allow the energies to come to me, but if there's someone who hasn't come in, then I try to ask them to come in. And I also tell them when we're done, they could ask questions if anything hasn't come up. As a messenger, I come in with neutrality, non-judgment, and a regard for their privacy. I tell them that I will never share their experience. They can share it if they choose to. And then just finally have an open heart, an open mind, and be accepting of all the love that is just flowing through.
Great. Thanks so much, Daria. That was really helpful. We'll move on to Laura Lynne Jackson, who's joining us from New York and has been a practicing medium for 26 years. She's the author of the New York Times bestsellers, Signs, The Secret Language of the Universe, and The Light Between Us. Laura, can you tell us about what a sitter can do during a reading to optimize the process?
Absolutely. I think it's really important to understand one's role as a sitter and what will be helpful in terms of having information come through in the reading and maybe stalling things a bit, right? So there's a couple do's and don'ts. What you don't want to do is you don't want to what's called feed the medium, which is volunteer all sorts of information. You get on the phone and say, I'm so excited because I really want to hear from my dad, whose name is Robert, who crossed on February 3rd of 1983 from lung cancer. What you don't want to do is ever feed information. What you need to do is just trust in the process and understand that energy is the only truth of our existence, and that those we love who have crossed to the other side, they're present for you, and they're going to work really hard to come through that medium at that time. But it is a 3-way triangle, right? It's our energy as a medium connected with the sitter's energy connected with the other side. So the more you're open to just allowing and trusting that process, the better the flow of information during the session will be. What you do want to do, though, is you do want to validate when you understand information coming through. I will say, as a medium bringing through messages, maybe 85% of the time, I have no idea what the messages mean, but they're very clear or they're very detailed about something specific, and I'll just say it. I'll pass along whatever I hear or whatever they're showing me. I will say that it is not important necessarily for the medium, him or herself, to understand the message as long as the sitter does. So what I have a tendency to do when I'm doing a session is I will say to the sitter, after I make a statement, I bring through information, I'll just say, do you understand that, or does that make sense to you? And as long as the sitter says, yes, I understand that, we just keep going, because I don't want to take the time and ruin the flow of very rapid information that's coming through to say to the sitter, like, well, now explain to me exactly how that makes sense. It's not important. The focus is not on the medium, it is on the sitter. So that's the first thing to just know, is to trust the information, let it flow, and acknowledge when you understand it. Conversely, it's also very important to acknowledge if you don't understand a certain message that comes through, because as mediums, it's this multifaceted language that's happening so rapidly, and we're trying really, really quickly to process it and to translate it into English. That's not to say that we don't at times hear names, phrases, songs, sentences, but for the most part, at least for me as a medium, when I read, it's really fast, rapid, almost like this emotional language that I translate into English. So if I make a statement, it's usually based on, they made me feel something, they showed me an image that related to something I'd understand, and then I translated that into a statement for the sitter. I can mistranslate. It's kind of like psychic charades or Pictionary. You can sometimes get it wrong. And the focus, again, is on getting the message conveyed accurately. So if I ever say something and it doesn't resonate with the sitter, all I ask is that the sitter not try to make it fit, but say, I'm not understanding that message, or that's not clear to me, or I don't understand what that is. And in that step, it allows me to back up as a medium a step, ask the other side to show it to me in a new way, or reinterpret it in order to get that message right. So the sitter's role is important in that sense of making sure you have a really wonderful experience during the reading by validating what you do understand and letting the medium know when it's confusing you or you're not quite clear on it.
Okay, great. That was super helpful. Okay, we'll move on to Traci Bray, who is a native of Clinton, Iowa, and is joining us today from Montgomery, Alabama. Traci has a master's degree in law enforcement and justice administration and has been a practicing medium for over 30 years. Traci, please share with us the things a sitter can consider doing after a reading is over.
Thanks for having me, Julie, and to address this important part of a reading, because I think readings that go best for people are ones that are interactive even afterwards, where the client continues to work. And I divided what I wanted to say quickly into 4 things: discovery, ruminating or rehashing the reading, being open to what happens after the session, and gratitude. And first with the discovery, I think it's important afterwards to do your homework. If names or places or things have come up that you're unaware of, but you think maybe a family member might know or a friend might know, check it out. Google or search things online that come up that you're unaware of or uncertain of. Sometimes historical elements will come into a reading, locations, places. I think it can be helpful to verify those things by looking them up. Sometimes for me, countries will come up, ones that I'm not even sure of where they are, which continent upon occasion, so that can be helpful. Also, if you were given suggestions in the reading, considering following through with them, like taking a class, reading a certain book. I know Laura Lynne's books come up sometimes in readings that Spirit will suggest to me that the client read. Look to the clouds. Sometimes there are answers there. I could speak to that for a couple of hours. The next thing would be rolling around words or descriptors that were given that just didn't make sense. An example I had in a reading once was where a grandfather coming through to the sitter, the client, was talking about castles. Now, I think most of us would picture a castle with a turret, Disneyland's castle, etc. A couple of days later, it didn't make sense to the reader, and as was mentioned, we went on because that info keeps coming for the medium. The client got a hold of me and said that she remembered that when she was a child, her grandfather would pack the car full with her and her siblings, cousins, the first thing they would do on their outing day was eat at White Castle. So, just keep working that discovery. The second thing is ruminating and rehashing the session. I think it can really get in the way of your full experience of the session if you assault yourself with what didn't make sense. Why didn't I get that? Why did that happen? Why didn't this happen? Instead, be grateful with joy for what happened. And I'll talk about gratitude in just a moment, a little bit more. But when we focus on disappointments, which sometimes there will be some for the sitter, I think that's what comes to us is more disappointment. So be open to what you might learn, which leads me to be open to what happens after the session. I can give you some examples that will show this best. One is I have a client I've read for probably 4 or 5 years now who's a physician. She's a daughter of physicians. Grew up on a different continent that we're all on right now, spoke different languages, and in her reading, SpaghettiOs came up. Now, to me, knowing her, knowing she eats nutritionally, not to bash SpaghettiOs, but I thought, my mind is telling me that doesn't make sense, but being a medium long enough tells me to say SpaghettiOs. I did. It didn't make sense to the client at all. A few days later, she emailed me and said to me, and this was her mother coming through saying SpaghettiOs. She was having dinner. Her farm manager had her over for dinner and cooked a skillet dinner with SpaghettiOs. Ergo, mom was letting her know, I'm around you. So if you go back and be open to what's happened after the session, I think that can be so important. The last thing I would say, gratitude is important for us. It's important, Julie mentioned at the beginning, this is a 3-part process, a part with spirit, with us as the medium, and then the sitter, 3 parts. And I think it's important to be thankful through thought or prayer, whatever your thing is, to with written word or spoken word. It's important to be grateful because they hear us. They hear us when we write, even though we might not be talking. They hear us when we speak, when we think. And also, indeed, I think it's important to be grateful. That might be if we have an altar at home that represents who we'd hoped to come through and they came through, or just an altar in general, or a place where there are a lot of family photos if it's a family member. Lay down some flowers. Put a new stone there or some trinket. Thank them for what they've done. Now you can also extend that thanks to another family member. For example, if my dad came through, my mom who's still living, I could maybe write a note to my mom about it if she were open to it. I could send my mom some flowers or something. So extending that gratitude out, I think, is really important. Just as the living respond to positivity, so do the dead. And remember to ask them for their assistance. Thanks.
Okay, great. I think I want to recap. This is a lot of really good advice. So before a reading, manage your expectations. Whatever you've seen on TV, however you think a medium should work, is supposed to work, let all that out of your head. Let the mediumship process happen as that medium wants it to. And be engaged in as much as you ask your deceased person to participate. Because again, there's 3 people. During the reading, remember that the medium is just a translator, that they don't know exactly what the meaning is of what's coming through. Remember that this is maybe the first time or the first time in a long time where somebody is sitting down with you and you're going to solely focus on the deceased person that you lost. That is not a situation that happens in your life very often, and it will be your tendency to want to say all the things about that person. You have to really try and rein that in. And also remember that there are things that might not make sense at the time, but they might later. So say that they don't make sense, but just keep that in your mind. And then after the reading, be grateful for the reading. Check on the information that you didn't know right off, because it's not just the minutes that the reading happened. It continues as you discover these more things as you go back over the content of the reading. So the sitter has a lot of jobs to do, and they're important to do in order to establish the success of a reading. Again, it is a triad. So thank you all so much. I think this was really helpful. I think we covered a lot of things, and I think it's a lot for sitters to think about. And I'm so grateful that you all joined me today to do this. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you, Julie.